My name is Savannah. I'm standing at the entrance of the barn, about to walk down the aisle to marry the love of my life, Marcus. But the man by my side isn't my father. It's Frank, Marcus's dad, a retired carpenter who's become more of a father to me than my own ever was. 3 days before my wedding, I was in my workshop, trimming roses for the centerpieces. The radio was playing softly, and I had soil under my nails. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was in my own little world. Then my phone rang, and the caller ID said, "Dad." I picked it up with my elbow, because my hands were wet. "Dad, I'm not walking you down the aisle," he said. Just like that, in 6 words, my heart shattered. I set the pruning shears on the counter and wiped my hands on my jeans. For a few seconds, I couldn't say a word. "Your sister, Isabella, says it would upset her. She's going through a rough time with her marriage," he explained. "Isabella is 3 years older than me, married, and has 2 kids. She's always been the center of my parents' world." I was furious. This was my wedding, not hers. But I didn't yell. I just asked him, "Did Isabella threaten you with the kids again?" After a long silence, he admitted that she had said if he walked me, she wouldn't bring the kids to Christmas. 10 minutes later, my mom called. "Go solo. Stop making drama. Lots of modern brides walk alone," she said, as if she was reading from a brochure. I was done. I was done pretending that my parents would ever choose me. I met Marcus 3 years ago. I was planting a rain garden for a county drainage project, and he was the structural engineer building a bridge upstream. We both showed up at 6:30 in the morning, both drinking black coffee from thermoses. He saw me struggling with a root system and walked over to help. That was the start of something beautiful. Our first date was a nursery tour and then tacos from a truck in the parking lot. We both had dirt on our boots, and it was the most natural evening of my life. 2 weeks later, he introduced me to his dad, Frank. Frank lived alone in a house he had built with his late wife, who had passed away from pancreatic cancer 8 years ago. There was a workshop in the back, filled with sawdust and the sound of classic rock. By week 3, Frank was calling me kiddo. By month 2, he had built me a bookshelf for my workshop, carving my initials S.C. on the inside of the left panel. Marcus proposed in the botanical garden I designed for the local library. It was an October evening, and the Japanese maples were turning a deep burgundy. He got down on one knee, and I said yes before he even finished the question. That night, I called my parents to tell them the news. My dad picked up on the 4th ring. "Congratulations," he said, but it sounded more like a formality than genuine excitement. My mom took the phone and asked, "Is he from a good family?" She didn't ask if I was happy or anything about the proposal. I designed the wedding invitations myself and hand-delivered them to my parents' house. I also asked my dad to walk me down the aisle, and he said yes quickly, almost reflexively. But Marcus warned me, "You know who they are, Savannah." "I know, but I want to give them one more chance," I replied. Growing up, I was always the one with dirt on my knees. When I was 14, I built a greenhouse in the backyard using scrap wood, plastic sheeting, and a hinge from an old cabinet. It wasn't pretty, but it grew tomatoes the size of my fist by August. That year, my school science fair fell on the same day as Isabella's regional spelling bee. I entered my greenhouse tomatoes and won first place. But my dad showed up 40 minutes late, just in time to see the judges stacking chairs. "Sorry, kiddo. Isabella's event ran long," he said, barely glancing at my blue ribbon. My high school graduation was overshadowed by Isabella getting her acceptance letter to a prestigious business school. My parents decided to combine the celebrations into one dinner, and all the speeches were about Isabella. No one mentioned my diploma, even though I had graduated with a 3.7 GPA and an acceptance to a horticulture program. When I told my mom about my horticulture degree, she set her coffee mug down and looked at me like I had said something in another language. "That's not a real career, Savannah," she said. I paid my own tuition through landscaping jobs and greenhouse work on campus, while Isabella's tuition was paid in full by my parents, $25,000 a year. Isabella got married to Ethan, an investment banker, and my parents glowed at the wedding like they had personally arranged the entire event. After that, They had 2 kids, Lily and Owen. My dad retired from his job when Owen was born and became completely focused on them. Isabella noticed how much power she had over my dad and started using the kids as leverage. She demanded the head of the table at Christmas and wanted family photos retaken without me in the background. My dad always gave in. The day after my dad told me he wouldn't walk me down the aisle, Marcus made me eggs in the morning. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I told him I didn't want to walk alone. He said, "Then you won't." He reminded me of all the things Frank had done for me, like building the bookshelf and driving 40 minutes to my shop to fix hinges. I decided to ask Frank. I drove to his house, and he was sanding a rocking chair in his workshop. When I told him what had happened, he looked at me with those steady gray eyes and said, "When do you need me?" I told him Saturday at 1 o'clock, and he said he'd be there at noon. Jeanette, my best friend and maid of honor, called me later and told me she had run into Isabella at the salon. Isabella was complaining about my wedding, saying that it was all about me and that my little garden business wasn't real work. Jeanette said, "She's not upset about the wedding, Savannah. She's jealous. You have Marcus, your business, and a life that doesn't need her to validate it." I realized that Isabella was using my wedding as an excuse to keep the spotlight on herself. Her marriage was falling apart, and she was trying to control the situation by manipulating my dad. On Thursday, I received a yellowed envelope from my grandmother, who had passed away 11 years ago. A neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had been my grandmother's closest friend, gave it to me. The letter said, "Savannah, when you read this, you're about to walk into the most important room of your life. The people who show up are your real family. Build something beautiful." The next 2 days were a blur. Jeanette handled all the logistics, and Marcus took Frank's suit shopping. I wrote my vows in my workshop, sitting next to the bookshelf Frank had built for me. On Friday evening, it was the rehearsal dinner. Frank drove 40 minutes from his house and arrived early to help the caterer. There were 30 guests, mostly from Marcus's side, along with a few of my friends. My parents and Isabella weren't there. Frank stood up for the toast. 3 years ago, a woman showed up at my son's job site and hauled a root ball out of a truck like it owed her money. I liked her immediately. "I never got a daughter, but God just made me wait a little longer," he said. The room went quiet, and I felt tears in my eyes. That same evening, I found out that my dad had sat in his garage, looking at a photo of me holding a tomato from the greenhouse. He had typed a message to me saying, "I'm proud of you, Savannah," but then deleted it. On Saturday morning, I woke up at 5:15. Marcus had slept at Frank's, and I made coffee and sat on the porch, looking at the garden I had planted when I moved into this house. My phone had messages from Frank and Marcus, telling me they were ready. I got ready, wearing a pearl hairpin that had belonged to my grandmother. When I arrived at the venue, Jeanette was there along with Ruth, another friend. Frank arrived in his new charcoal suit, looking both proud and a little uncomfortable. He gave me a small wooden box with a boutonniere made of dried oak leaves and baby's breath. At noon, I peeked through the curtain and saw Marcus's side of the room filled with his family and friends. My side was smaller, but still had some of my close friends and clients. And then I saw the back row. My dad, mom, and Isabella were there looking out of place. For a moment, I thought maybe they were there to make things right. But then I saw my mom lean over and whisper something to my dad, and he nodded without looking up. I knew they were just there to say they had been there. The music started, and the bridesmaids walked down the aisle. Then it was my turn. Frank offered me his arm, and I placed my hand on his forearm. "You good?" he asked. "I'm good," I replied. We walked down the aisle, and I didn't look at the back row. I looked straight ahead at Marcus, who was standing at the end with wet eyes and a big smile. As we reached the altar, Frank said, "Her family does. All of us who showed up." The ceremony was beautiful, and when it came time for vows, I said, "I choose you, and I choose the family we build, not the one we were given, the one we make with our hands every day from the ground up." After the ceremony, we had the reception. Frank stood up for another toast, telling the story of how I had saved a dying fern at his house. People started talking about my work, and I felt proud. My dad found me at the dessert table. "That man did a good job. His name is Frank, he said. I looked at him and said, sorry that you missed it, or sorry that everyone saw. He flinched, and then my mom appeared and pulled him away. The father-daughter dance was with Frank. We danced to an acoustic cover of Lean on Me, and Jeanette cried again. Isabella was sitting at a corner table, looking miserable. Preston, her husband, wasn't there. Mrs. Thompson walked over to Isabella and said, your grandmother would have been so proud of Savannah today. She would have been proud of both of you, Isabella, if you had let her. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, and she went to the bathroom. I didn't go after her. I just kept dancing with Frank. Some doors close because you shut them, and others close because the person on the other side stops holding them open. 2 days after the wedding, I opened my workshop as usual. Marcus brought me coffee, and Frank came by with a cutting board he had been working on for weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Can we talk? I set the phone down and started working on a new landscape design for a children's wing garden at the local hospital. 2 weeks later, Isabella called. Preston left.
He moved out last week, she said.
I listened as she finally admitted that she had been using my parents to fill a void in her life. I told her I hoped she would find what she needed, but I couldn't be her emotional cushion anymore. A letter arrived from my dad a few days later. He wrote that he should have walked me down the aisle, that he had been choosing the easy way out for my whole life, and that he was proud of me. I read the letter twice and placed it in my desk drawer next to my grandmother's letter. I used to think family was about blood, but now I know it's about who shows up. Frank, Marcus, Jeanette, and all the others who were there for me on my wedding day are my real family. And I'm grateful for every one of them.